Hey guys, welcome back. This is part 3 of our interview. Welcome Morgan back to my channel. She has her channel, My Spiritual Life. I'm linking it below for those of you who haven't seen it yet. Go check it out, go subscribe. We both want to see you back. And this is the part 3 to our interview. If you haven't seen part 1 and 2, I recommend you go check those out, preferably first, before you see this one. And we just would love for you to hear all of the questions and answers because it's been really great so far. Were you brought up fully trusting the Bible?
No, I remember that it was always presented to me like we believe the Book of Mormon and Bible equally, right? Like we believe them the same, but the Book of Mormon is way more trustworthy because the way it was presented to me is like, oh, the Bible's been translated like 1.5 billion times. So it's probably, they play the telephone game with us. Like, where you like whisper into the ear next to you. And then it gets down to the end, they're like, look. And I'm like, well, then why do we even read the Bible, right? Like, or if it's that bad. But like, look, the Book of Mormon just basically came from the mouth of God exactly because of Joseph Smith. So it's like so much more reliable. So I feel like I was definitely taught to be much more receptive and focused on the Book of Mormon than I was the Bible. But again, we would always preach like, yeah, we believe them both. They're both great. Like,
yeah.
So,
yeah, I feel like as long as it's translated correctly, theme is so huge to the point where it's like, if Mormon doctrine contradicts the Bible, we always trust the Mormon doctrine and the continuing revelation. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. That's spot on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so along those same lines, would you say that you talked about Jesus or Joseph Smith more in sacrament meeting, in church settings, among family, and then also hymns that you sang? Do you feel as though the emphasis was greatly, focused on Joseph Smith or Jesus, both, one or the other? I was curious.
I would say, at least I felt like it was more focused on Jesus, but I felt like, one thing that was odd was that it was way more focused on Joseph Smith than like any of our current prophets.
Yeah.
Like I knew way more about Joseph Smith than I ever knew about Hinckley or Kimball or Monson, the more recent, Latter-day Saint prophets. And that looking back, I find that kind of bizarre because it's like we knew so much about Joseph Smith and how he grew up and his family and his parents and like what it was like for him starting the church and stuff. And yet we didn't hardly know anything about like any of our current prophets. Like I didn't know what careers they have or what their family life is like. And I find that kind of bizarre looking back. So yes, I feel like we focused a lot on Jesus, but I feel like we focused a lot on Joseph Smith to the extent that we almost didn't even focus on like our current prophet, which should be the most important, right? Like,
yeah. What about with hymns that you sang in church? Did you feel like you sang about Joseph Smith or the prophet, or did you feel as though you kind of sang about both? I'm just curious what hymns stand out in your mind and really kind of who they were about.
I definitely feel like there was a lot of songs about Joseph Smith, but I feel like there was a lot about Jesus as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, my favorites were not ones about Joseph Smith. So like off the top of my head, like some of my favorites were like, I Need Thee Every Hour. Like, I still like these songs, like How Firm a Foundation, or like, The Spirit of God. Is that what it's called? I'm so ex-Mormon that I don't even remember the names.
Oh, it's okay. I put you on the spot there. You're good.
I'm just laughing at myself. It's funny. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like, yes, we sang a lot about Joseph Smith, but I think we sang more about Jesus. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, I know. We, having visited sacrament meeting and then also just hearing and looking through the LDS hymnal, it was interesting to see that there were actual hymns about the prophet. I was like, whoa, we're singing hymns to the prophet. Because, in in a Baptist church, for example, with the hymnal, you would only ever sing about God, ever. And so that was really interesting. And then this leads me to another question. There's that hymn called, is it Oh My Father? Did I get that right? It's an LDS hymn, and it mentions the Heavenly Mother.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Did you sing that one? Are you familiar with it?
Yes. I remember that was like the only, as far as I know, like I remember as a teenager, like that was like the only Mormon doctrine that like talked about Heavenly Mother,
Mm-hmm.
and like that it was in that one hymn or whatever. And I remember like the way this was explained to me was that and I think I heard this from my parents. I don't really remember where I heard it from, and it was like, oh, the reason why we don't talk about Heavenly Mother is because Heavenly Father is like trying to keep her safe, because like people take the Lord's name in vain and stuff, and they say bad things about God, and he doesn't want them to say that about his wife. And I was like, oh, how sweet.
Oh.
But now I'm like, wait, what? Like, I don't get it. Plus, like, the Mormon perspective on taking the Lord's name in vain is saying, oh my God, which really is just an expression. It's not usually one is trying to use as a vulgar thing against God. Like, and so I'm like, is he really worried like someone's gonna be like, oh my female God? Like,
oh my Heavenly Mother, I suppose, right?
yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've heard that one several times, and I thought that was really interesting. There's another hymn too that I heard just recently, and I know I'm sure you know it. If I Hi to Kolob.
Yep. I knew you were gonna bring that one up next. I was like, that's it. Kolob, yes. You know, I swear I was Mormon for 20 something years, and I feel like I still don't really understand the concept of Kolob. My understanding is that it's the star that God lives on. That's all I think that I know.
Yeah, Kolob's not talked about a whole lot. I've read about it in the Book of Abraham and Pearl of Great Price, and yeah, it's really interesting. The star where God resides nearest to, or whatever. Did you sing that hymn in church?
Oh, a lot, yeah.
Okay.
I sang about it a lot. I just didn't think about it a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Okay. Well, just my thoughts, wondering what actually goes down week after week, because I haven't gone that many times. So.
Oh, yeah. Good question.
Oh, man.
I remember thinking it was a cool song, like kind of about wonder and beauty, and like, wow, like if we could go to see God, how cool that would be. And but I don't remember thinking like, oh, that's a weird concept. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it much, but yeah, it's definitely funny. Like, and it's funny, like looking at these from an outside perspective too, because I don't have any friends. Like I don't have any friends that really care to ask much about Mormonism and point out what's weird, you know? Like, I've never really realized till we were just talking that, like, singing about Joseph Smith is kind of weird. Like, because why would, like, that I didn't really think about that ever before, that, like, if that's, like, a form of worship, that's kind of bizarre. So, that's funny. Anyway. Thanks.
Yeah, that is interesting that it kind of doesn't even stick out in your mind, but to an outsider seeing that hymnal, you're like, wait a second, who are we singing about? Who are we singing to? Yeah, it is wild, coming from a different belief system. Yeah. Also, now that you brought that up, it kind of reminded me of some of your statements. You were saying that you focus so much on Joseph Smith and testify about Joseph Smith being a true prophet, and it's emphasized, all the time. And yet, why aren't these small children and everybody, why aren't they saying, I testify that Russell M. Nelson is a true prophet of God? Like, has anyone ever said that? Is that a thing?
They do. Like, in bearing testimonies, people will say that, but it's, in my opinion, it's much less frequent.
Okay.
Like if they're talking specifically about General Conference, they'll get up there and be like, oh, President Nelson said this, and like, and I just reaffirmed my testimony that he's a true prophet. Like, but it's so common to get up there and to say, I know the truth is true, I know Joseph Smith was a prophet, and I know Jesus is the Christ. That's kind of like the key things that people will say. And yeah, how weird is it that we will keep talking about Joseph Smith instead of like the current prophet? But that's because there's this way that the testimony is built for you. It's if Joseph Smith is a prophet, then the Book of Mormon is true and the church is restored. So that's why I think there is so much emphasis, because if we can convince everyone Joseph Smith is a prophet, everything else lines up like perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it all, stands or falls on Joseph Smith's validity as a true prophet. And it's all dependent on whether or not the Book of Mormon is true, is what you hear. So if those are wrong, then how could you follow the rest of it? And then it's just so funny too. It strikes me as odd that it all, stands or falls on the Book of Mormon. But I'm like, well, what about Pearl of Great Price and the Doctrine and Covenants? Because I have read the majority of both. And I'm like, there's some major differences, and so much that's contained in the D&C is not in the Book of Mormon. And so I'm like, well, isn't that a big deal? Like, what about this scripture?
That is such a good point. And especially if you think about it, the Doctrine and Covenants is the most current, like, huge amount of revelation we've had ever. Like, because the Book of Mormon, it was translated in 1830, right? And but that was written, a long time ago, supposedly. But like all of the Doctrine and Covenants, you're right, it's like it's from the 1800s. That's the most revelation we've ever received, like from God, more currently. So why don't we ever say, like, I know the Doctrine and Covenants is true? We just don't. It's weird.
Yeah, it is so odd. And then I think
you're right. Like that's.
Yeah, and then as a Mormon, it's like, you and I know that the Doctrine and Covenants contains the word of wisdom. The Doctrine and Covenants contains ordinances, and it talks about eternal marriage, and it talks about a plurality of gods, and it talks about all of these things that the Book of Mormon does not say a word about, or to be totally honest, says the opposite as far concerning God and stuff like that. So it always struck me as interesting. Meeting with the elders, we were like, bring all of the scriptures, because we want to read them all. And it was just real interesting. And I was like, I think there needs to be more transparency and testifying of the Doctrine and Covenants, because really that is the core of your doctrine and articles of faith and everything else.
Yeah, and it just seems disingenuous a lot of times when everyone gets up there and says the same thing, like, and they all just want to talk about the Book of Mormon with Joseph Smith, like. And it's one of those things where that's all you hear, so that's all you say, and not that everyone bears their testimony that way, but that's the most frequent. And it does seem like it's almost it almost just feels like it's not very genuine, even though I felt genuine when I was saying it,
Yeah, it's just a curious thought. It's like there's more scripture, but so many people have, non-Mormons have really never even heard of them unless they kind of delve into learning, about the church. It's like we just think all you guys have is the Book of Mormon. So
yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next subject. What was your first red flag as a Latter-day Saint that caused you to just begin searching out really all of your beliefs?
I would say that some of my early red flags would have been like as a teenager, just certain things not feeling right. But I mean, for the most part, I was really in, like, there just certain things, like, for example, like gay marriage. I remember I had, some friends that were gay, and I just remember thinking, like, I don't know how to, like I have to, I want to love them, and I do love them, but I have to, like, not be okay with their, and I just didn't get it, and that was one thing that I was like, I don't know, but, but God is God, and, that's fine. So then, but when I was older, it really wasn't until after my husband left the church that I mean, and years after that I really started to question. So about 2 years after we got married, around the time I was 21-ish, my husband Jared was like done with the church, and he was like telling me he didn't want to be a part of it anymore, and I was devastated. So I felt like, families can be together forever, right? Then my parents get divorced. Families can be together forever. My husband leaves the church. I'm like, oh, like all this is happening. But it did start to build cognitive dissonance as I was trying to go get help and advice from people. And people started to tell me stuff like, you need to get a divorce because your husband, now that he left the church, it's a slippery slope and he's going to start drinking and then he's going to start cheating on you. And like, they were telling me these terrible, terrible things. And I remember just being like shocked that that was their advice. Like that, like, even though we were having a hard time in our marriage because of him leaving the church, because, you know, I'm feeling like, you know, he's like ruined our salvation and he's feeling like I'm not, like, I don't think he's good enough for me, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, this hurt on both sides. And yet, I still felt like there was so much good in our marriage. Like, I felt like we loved each other. I felt like we were committed to each other. And I felt like people telling me like, oh, you just got to drop him and get divorced was like, I was like, are you serious? Like, so I remember that kind of started to like, in my mind be like, unsettling, like, wait, that can't be it. And I'm so glad that I didn't get divorced because that would have been terrible. Like, just because of, you know, the church telling me, like, people in the church thinking that was the right thing to do. And even church leaders will tell you that like there's only certain good reasons to get a divorce, and like it's like abuse or apostasy. Like they tell you that if your spouse leaves, it's a good reason to get a divorce. And I think that's terrible advice.
Yeah.
Because that's like, first of all, if you believe the church is true, you don't know if they're going to come back. Like, you don't know, you could be a good influence on them, right? I don't know. Anyway, I'm getting intense. So kind of what started me looking into everything. Initially, when he left the church, our relationship was difficult because he felt like he couldn't tell me a lot of the Mormon stuff he had found out because he didn't want to like push me into any decisions. And I felt like I couldn't talk to him about my kind of spiritual experiences because I felt like he was going to like Satan all over them. And so it was really hard because we were lacking communication. And I feel like once we kind of stepped back and got some therapy and like started to realize that like we still were really committed to each other and that we, you know, we had similar goals and stuff still, that all of a sudden I feel like it was when we stopped trying to change each other that all of a sudden we were able to communicate. And once we were able to communicate, then I started asking him questions. And I mean, he had told me some things, like I think he had mentioned to me like about some of the gospel topics essays. He's like summarized some of that for me out of his, not trying to push me, but his sincere questioning and stuff like that. When I would hear stuff like that, I would just kind of say to myself, like, you know what, the church isn't perfect, or people in the church aren't perfect, but the gospel's perfect. So that's all that matters, right? So that's how I would kind of flush that away. But then when we started communicating more seriously, that's when I started asking him, okay, so I went to my stake president, right? And I told him about like how I was having a hard time because my husband wasn't really wanting to be part of the church anymore. And he said to me, he said, the only thing that will bring your husband back is the Book of Mormon. He said, the Book of Mormon will bring your husband back. And so that's when we were communicating better. So I thought, I'll just talk to him about it and see what he says. So I said to him, I said, so, okay, I know you don't want to be a part of the church, but what do you think of the Book of Mormon then? Like, where do you think that came from if it couldn't have come from God, right? And to my shock, he had like all these answers that I was not expecting. And again, those kind of things just started to get me being like, wait, what? Because I'm like, what? And even then I started doing, you know, I looked into it a little bit like that. I think I started reading Rough Stone Rolling a little bit, started asking more questions, just trying to understand. And I remember like thinking, okay, well, the Book of Mormon doesn't have to be like completely historically true to be like true in the sense that it's helpful and good to read, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where things started. I don't know if you want me to just keep going or yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my next question is kind of the same thing as, you know, what initially made you question your beliefs in faith, and coming from that initial red flag. And yeah, I was just kind of curious how that all spiraled down. And then you've covered a little bit. The questions I had following this is, when did you come across the gospel topics essays? And was anything in there a surprise to you?
Yes. So like I said, in our early interactions with him starting to doubt and starting to kind of leave, he was telling me certain things from the gospel topic essays, but I was I was surprised by all of it. I didn't know any of it. I didn't even know Joseph Smith was a polygamist.
Wow.
I had no idea. I knew Brigham Young was a polygamist, but I had never been taught Joseph Smith was a polygamist. Now, I think there's a shift happening in the church where more people know about that now, but growing up, I had no idea. No idea.
Wow.
I think I started feeling some cognitive dissonance with all this. And then what happened was, just over time, I kept asking him more questions. Like, well, what about the witnesses? Or what about this or that? Or what about, like the temple? And like, he always had an answer. And he was always super polite. Like, he was never trying to push me. Like, he would only answer questions if I asked. And he would always give me like both perspectives. Like, he would give me like fair Mormon. He would be like, well, here's what the Mormons say about that. And here's what what other people say about that. He would give me like both to try to like, I think, make it easier for me to swallow,
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering too, with kind of those same subjects, what about Joseph Smith not even looking at the golden plates when he, translated them? When did you find out about him sticking his face in a hat, with his seer stone inside, and, the plates are, there's documentation saying they're nowhere near him, and he's just, doing it through his seer stone. Did that stuff kind of bother you or make you think? Had you heard it before?
It definitely bothered me. I think that was all around the same time as I heard about the gospel topic essays. And I didn't hear everything, but I heard parts of them from Jared telling me. And so then also hearing about the face and the hat thing, I think that was one of the more first things that I had heard. So I thought that's weird, and I don't know why, if the church is true, we're not honest about that. Because if the church is true, then we don't have anything to hide. So why would we have all these pictures of him, like he's got the thing up and he's writing, and I'm like, why would we? And I was like, well, maybe it's just because it's so bizarre, and like, it definitely makes for a weird picture.
Yeah, right.
So I remember thinking that's super weird, but I didn't know any alternative, because I thought, well, he couldn't have made it up himself. He had like a 3rd grade education, and like, so I thought, well, God works in mysterious ways. That's kind of what I thought. Now looking back, I'm like, that's absurd. And it makes sense why we don't tell people that, because no one wants to believe that kind of thing, whether it's true or not, it's freaking absurd, right? So I get why the church doesn't necessarily teach that. But anyway, yeah, it was crazy. So like all of this is kind of like building up underneath my skin, I feel like, right? For years, like let's see, because I was 21, and then it was when I was 23 that it was last year of 2018. I was February. I remember I was getting ready for church, and I just had like a complete mental breakdown, and I was just crying, and it was because all of these doubts I had been piling up underneath, or stacking on the shelf, like they say that metaphor is stacking on your shelf, and I just felt like it was too much, and all of a sudden I felt like I was in a faith crisis, and I was panicking. But I remember even feeling guilty in admitting that I had some serious doubts. I remember crying to Jared saying, I'm having problems, but I feel like I can't even talk about them, because it felt like a sin even saying that I was doubting. Mm-hmm. And that was terrifying. Like, that was like a really scary time. And Jared handled it so well. He was really loving and accepting. And he was like, listen, like, I'm here for you no matter what. Like, I'm going to love you whether you're Mormon or not, so let's just help you get into a better headspace, Yeah. Anyway, and and it was at that point, and I was super pregnant at the time too, because my baby was due in May, my first son, and my only son, but first. And so so I'm like, okay, I'm having these doubts, but I convinced myself that this was going to be like my coming back to Jesus moment. Like, it was going to be like, I have all these doubts, and I was going to go and I was going to find all the answers, and then I was going to be like the best Mormon that had ever Mormoned, and I was just going to just kick everyone's butt with my testimony, and it was just going to be amazing. And so even though I was having a really hard time, I felt like I was going to make it. I was going to make it through, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So from there, I started to just think a lot more about God, and like how I view him, and what he means to me. And I started to think about things like for example, Jared leaving the church. You're kind of always taught that, like, well, if your spouse leaves the church, they're going to do bad things, right? But he wasn't a bad guy, and he was happy, and he was fun, and he was like loving, and like just all sorts of awesome. And I was like, well, this doesn't seem right? But then at the same time, I was like, well, why would God punish him? Because he sincerely doesn't believe the church is true. Now, it might be true, and at the time I thought it is true, but he sincerely believes it's not. He's not trying to rebel. He's not trying to be a jerk. He sincerely believes it's not true, and he's sincerely trying to be a good person. So I was like, why would God punish that? And then I started thinking about my aunt. I have one aunt on my mom's side who had left the church years previously, and she had been really helpful to a lot of ex-Mormons, like trying to help them find community and faith and love. And I remember thinking, like, would God be mad at her? Like, would God really be mad? Because she's helping people. She's not taking people away from the church. Like, when people are feeling like they want to leave, she's comforting them and saying, you're going to be okay. You can do it. You can, you can love God, and, and in your own way. And I remember just thinking, like, would God really be mad at that? And it was just all this dissonance started building up. So then May comes, and my son is born, and I'm just like mentally a mess, right? Because I'm like, I just popped out a baby, like I got all these hormones going on, and I feel like that's when I really hit this, like, I don't think that the Mormon church is presenting God correctly. And it was like, but it scared me. And I remember specifically thinking, I'm scared that the church is not true, because it feels like my whole life is a lie if that's the case. But I'm scared that the church is true, because there's a lot that they're teaching that I'm not okay with, and I don't know how I'm supposed to leverage that, because how am I supposed to teach my kids about these things if I don't agree? And yet it's like, I would just be wrong. You can't have your own opinion when you're Mormon. It's like, your opinion is wrong if it's not aligning with the Mormon opinion. So that's when everything just kind of seriously broke down for me, and I was in serious faith crisis mode. Before I continue, tell me if I'm covering the gaps, or if you have questions, or...
Yeah, I mean, feel free to continue. I have a question, but I don't want to get you off topic if you feel as though you have more to say to kind of like conclude that chapter.
Sure. I'll just keep going then real quick. So from there, from like this kind of breakdown when I had my baby, and I realized, like, I don't know if I want to raise him in this church if I feel like they're not teaching everything that I agree with. And because I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, why would God care if someone drinks tea or coffee? Like, why would God care? Like just these things that just didn't make sense all of a sudden. And it was scary, but I felt like a bad person for even thinking those things. And so it was just a mess. And I think what, kind of happened from there is I kept thinking more about God and what he would look like and think like, and really thinking hard about it. And then from there, I was like, I started to listen to Mormon Stories podcasts and look more into church history stuff. And that's when everything really exploded for me, because I think I got to a point where I decided I don't like the way the Mormon church is presenting God, but I still felt like it was true, and I felt obligated to it. Mm-hmm. But once I started reading all the unpleasant church history, that's when I was like, oh, it's kind of validating. It was validating to feel like, oh, maybe this is not what I thought this church was growing up. And it just started to take the church off its pedestal for me. And it kind of, it was a terrible mess. but it was good in the sense that I realized I didn't have to be confined to this certain way of thinking or the certain way of that God thinks or whatever anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot. This is like your whole life, your whole worldview, your entire family, your marriage, your church, your community, all's like crashing down for the second time. I understand it's hard to even just contain it all in this little nutshell story. So, I mean, I appreciate the details and I understand there's probably so much more to it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, you kind of mentioned this as far as the lack of historical evidence or archaeology or even the Book of Mormon lands being so all over the place and unknown, and the Hill Cumorah and then Mesoamerica, or is it northeastern United States, and it's just all over. Did that stuff kind of strike you as troubling, or did you kind of discover that as time passed? Did that play a role for you in your questioning?
Yeah, I would definitely say like a big portion of my testimony was around the Book of Mormon, and because that's how they set it up. It's around Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith is a prophet, Book of Mormon is true, church is restored, right? So when I started to hear about these bad things Joseph Smith had done, then I was like, okay, well, maybe he just really sucked and the Book of Mormon is still true. I was reading like Rough Stone Rolling, like about I think the time just after my son was born, and realizing that like even some Mormon historians agree that the Book of Mormon is a piece of fiction. Like and they still like it. They still think it's true in the sense that it's something God wants them to study. But to me, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like if the Book of Mormon is, if we say all the time, the Book of Mormon is true, but like the word true doesn't even mean true as in historically true. Like it just means true as in it's a good thing to read. Like that just blew my mind. And that was, I mean, I think that was a big part of me feeling like this church is not what I thought it was, and it really started to take the church off its pedestal because of all the issues with the Book of Mormon that just didn't line up.
Yeah. What about the teaching of, this is a totally different subject, but I was curious if this was kind of a trigger for you. What about the teaching of blood atonement? Were you familiar with it, and how did you feel about it?
I had never heard of it ever. And I think it wasn't until I was kind of in the Mormon rabbit hole that I had briefly heard it mentioned about, was it Brigham Young that was like, oh, some sins are so bad you have to shed blood for them or something? I don't even know.
It was mostly Brigham Young, and it was taught by some others as well, but definitely people kind of bring it back to Brigham Young because he had such extreme statements in regard to blood atonement, even, when it comes to being horribly racist and everything else. Yeah, so I would say Brigham Young.
Still the prophet.
Yeah.
This church would be so fun.
Yeah. Oh man. And then I've actually, along that same line, I've heard a lot of Mormons who are very familiar with the issues and these type of topics. And I've had a handful of them right here on my channel even say, well, Joseph Smith, he's good. He was a true, Brigham Young was a pretty evil man, but don't put it on Joseph. But I'm like, but wait, don't we have to sustain all the prophets? Because it has to be a, true line of prophets, from then till now. Like, we can't just throw Brigham Young, the racist, out. We have to, he needs to be legit as well. So I don't know if Brigham Young stuck out to you.
They sound like they want to be like a Mormon offshoot, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, because it's like, yeah, if this church is true, then why would God have let someone be sustained that was evil? It just doesn't make sense. So I feel you on that.
Yeah. And now that you bring that up, I know that I have had RLDS and FLDS. I've had different commenters, come on. So I'm like, were they, Latter-day Saints? But interesting, the blood atonement thing. That's a big one for some people. And then some people, it's just so buried in the history. It's like, nope, I'm not really even familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you feel as though you've already answered this or not, but what
Sure.
was there, I suppose I meant to say, was there one specific thing, or was it just a big long series of things that just brought you out? Was it one main thing and you're like, okay, I'm done?
That's a good question. So, and this will be perfect because it kind of finishes the timeline for us. So, I think, my son's born in May. I'm like having serious doubts about the way Mormons present gods, and then I'm learning all about church history, and I think it was I got to a point where I watched this one documentary somewhere, and it was talking about Joseph Smith, and it was talking more about even more specifics about the polygamy that I hadn't heard of before, and like about how he would say like, oh, your family will have salvation if you marry me, and like that blew like because I'm like, okay, if Joseph Smith's a prophet, then that means that was seriously revelation from God.
Yeah.
God told him he would give their family salvation if she married him. And to me, God doesn't work that way. To me, that just blew my mind. And on top of that, the other kind of nail in the coffin for me was when I had found out that Joseph Smith had been arrested previously, before the whole Book of Mormon starting the church and everything. He had been arrested for using the seer stones to find gold on people's land or artifacts or whatever, right? His money digging or whatever they called it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was what con men did, because they'd go to the owner and say, oh, if you pay me, I'll find, these rare artifacts on your land. And it's a scam. And to me, finding out that he was arrested for that, I think allegedly that was what the arrest was for. I think maybe there's some uncertainties about it. But then taking those seer stones and going and translating the Book of Mormon with them, to me, that just really, I think it finalized things for me, because it just validated to me that it's like, there's no way, like this just does not add up. It just all seems too bizarre. And that, I think, was kind of my breaking point. And it was hard, coming to that conclusion, because I wanted the church to be true. I didn't want everything I had believed in my whole life to be a lie. I didn't want that to be the case, but I just felt like that after everything, that was kind of like the last time I got off the fence. I'll say, like, I was on the fence like probably from February of 2018 until like January of this year. And that was probably the last time I got off the fence.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's the last time.
So that was kind of your process of searching and figuring out timeline wise. Was it really kind of this past year and a half, or was it longer than that?
Yeah. And I would say that what stretched longer than that was just Jared telling me things and me letting those kind of build up under my skin, until last February I finally openly admitted that I was having doubts.
Yeah.
And from there it just kind of spiraled. But so how long has it been? It's been a few years, but really it's been the last like year and a half has been, so it's very fresh still. And I would say I didn't even start calling myself ex-Mormon until like February, like a few months ago.
Yeah. Wow. So what were your thoughts about the priesthood after all of your doubts and your journey out of Mormonism?
It's funny because I remember being a kid and like wondering why girls didn't have the priesthood at one point. And my mom said to me, boys have the priesthood and girls have babies. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's obviously.
Oh no.
And I seriously thought, well, that makes sense. We just have different roles. Like, and so I was like, sure. But it didn't bother me until Jared left the church, the whole priesthood situation. Because when Jared left the church, I'm sitting in Relief Society, right? And everyone's like, oh, like, I just love having the priesthood in my home and da-da-da. And I'm like, this is unfair. because I didn't do anything wrong and I don't get the priesthood in my home. That's unfair. And so then further, when I ended up, leaving the church, then I was like, holy cow, that is really unfair. Like, because like to say that men get this thing only and that women don't, it's like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would God say that men get to have that and women don't? I know some Mormons will be like, oh, it's because the men need that responsibility. And it's like, so then the women get punished because men need responsibility? That doesn't sound like the way God works in my mind. Yeah.
Well, and then what about all the single women? What about the women who have never been married, who are unable to, find a spouse? They just like become angels or something, right? Like, what do they do?
Well, and even in this lifetime, they get cut short because they don't have someone that has the priesthood in the house. And it's like a holier thing to have the priesthood in your house. And if you don't have that, life is just harder. And it's just silly, And it's ridiculous to think that God would give superpowers to the guys and not the girls. It's just weird. And I love, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. And you love what?
Well, I loved like the concept of the priesthood, like that, like when God restored the church, like now we have like his power back on earth. I loved that concept. I loved getting blessings. Like I still like getting blessings, but they're because they're comforting, and it's like, it's like God telling you everything's gonna be okay or whatever. But at the same time, like looking back at it, I'm like, I don't know why moms can't give their kids blessings, because it just feels like a special prayer. And if it's a special prayer, why is the mom not allowed to do that? It's just weird.
I was just going to say, with the blessing, and I know there's the patriarchal blessings and all of that, but also, men holding the priesthood and women not. So your husband holds the priesthood, you're sealed to him, you're good, right? But then it's like, how does it work without that? So if I'm 57 years old, I've never gotten married, it's not going to happen for me. Do I just get like an eternal sealing to some random dude? Like, what do I do? No,
that's exactly it. That's my understanding, is that's exactly it. You'll have a chance to be married in the next life to a stranger.
Okay.
Maybe there's dating, I don't know, but that's pretty much it. And they say you can't even get to the celestial kingdom without being married in the temple.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to be married after you die. But yeah, it's like those kind of situations make you feel like a second-class citizen. Yeah. And like you're just not good enough, and it's frustrating because it's like, obviously it, like in God's eyes, you're always so special and so important, and yet apparently not.
I know. I've gotten comments from some of my viewers who are, very devout Mormon women. And I've had actually more than one say, I'm single, I'm not married, I don't have any children, but I am a devout Mormon, and this is everything to me, and I'm happy, I don't need anything else. But I'm like, it's so hard for me to hear that, because I'm like, but I know your doctrine, so what happens to you eternally? You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be a heavenly father. You're not going to be a heavenly mother, because you don't have a heavenly father. What do we do here? And so I don't mean to be disrespectful, but when I view the doctrine and like the situation, I'm like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, how can you be content unless you have that eternal family and the exaltation into celestial kingdom? Unless you're just good with going to celestial or whatever, like, I'll be good there. I don't know.
Boring heaven's good enough for me. I think I think they just trust that like God wouldn't punish them because of something that wasn't their fault. So like they just get hooked up to some random guy, some other terrestrial guy, and then they can level up.
Okay. Oh man, it's so confusing when you get into that deep doctrine, end of time stuff.
It is so confusing. I feel silly that I don't even understand certain aspects of it, but I'm like, well, it's just weird.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you this. It's not on my list, but we're here. So, eternal families. Okay, say you and your husband are sealed in the temple. You have your son, you seal him to you. But then when he's old enough to get married, he's going to get sealed to his wife. And I would imagine well, yeah, I know your parents were divorced, but you at one point were sealed to your parents and maybe them to theirs. So what's the eternal family? How can you have your own earth one day where you're populating and everything, if you're all sealed together for generations and generations, like, I'm confused.
So I guess the idea there is that we're all linked together like a big chain, right? So that we're all connected, forever. But what's the purpose of that? I don't know. I guess so we can visit each other more easily. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I know
and I was gonna say too that just as a clarification that if you get married in the temple and you have children after you're married in the temple, they are already automatically sealed to you. It's only if you like adopt a kid or you have a kid before you got married that you actually have to physically seal them to you.
I got that mixed up because one of my good friends adopted a child and had that child sealed to them. So for some reason, I had it in my mind that they sealed all their kids to them. But now that you mention it, yeah, I had that twisted.
It's honestly bizarre, and I think it would have been cool to like go to the temple and like get sealed to my parents, but I think it's kind of lazy. They're just like, oh, you were born and they were in the temple, so you're pretty much connected, you're fine.
Okay. No, I'm glad you clarified that. That was something that I have had this assumption in my mind ever since I knew about that sealing. I thought at some point, every child or whatever, kind of like, dedicating your baby. But they do that anyways, right?
Yes.
Okay. And we do that in my church as well, in the sense that we, have our little ones, and it's basically a commitment to like raise them right, not like they're going to be in this church sealed to me for all eternity. Like, my kids have absolute choice with everything. I want them to know why they believe what they believe. But I was going to say baby dedications are a normal thing in many, many churches. So
True. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I hope that you've joined us for all of the parts so far, part 1, 2, and now 3. It's been such a fun process getting to know Morgan and doing these interviews together, getting her answers to some of these tough questions. So thanks so much for joining us. And I just hope that you have enjoyed these videos, and just know that we both have many videos that cover LDS topics here on both of our channels. So come on back to see more. Again, hit the subscribe button below. We'd love to see you back. I'm linking Morgan's channel in the description below this video. So go click on that, head on over and hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.